Everyone thinks they know what the New York Jets are going to do at the top of the NFL draft, but they could shake up the entire process if they went with Sonny Styles at number 2. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Louis DiBiase, the Legacy. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. On today's show, we are going to look at the top 7 picks in the first round. What could these teams do? What are their options? And we're going to go through every single team in the first round throughout the rest of the week here at Locked On NFL. So make sure that you stay locked in with the Locked On NFL podcast. But thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. And thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. But Louis, the Jets could shake up the entire draft based on what they will do. Now, at this stage, I think it's fair to say that it's most likely that the Jets go with one of the edge rushers. If you want to consider Arvell Reese an edge rusher, I know that there's a big debate in the NFL media community right now as to what he's going to be, but I think Arvell Reese is an edge rusher. I think that should be what his primary job is in the NFL. The versatility is great and all of that, but that would be my move. We know that David Bailey is an edge rusher, and as of late, at least in the betting markets, David Bailey has made a huge push to where now he's the favorite to go number 1, but you listen to local media people for the Jets, and they still lean Arvell Reese. If you were the Jets and you were deciding between those two players, Arvell Reese and David Bailey, what would you do?
Yeah, personally, I like David Bailey a little bit more than Arvell Reese. And I think when you look at the combination of length of burst off the line of scrimmage, David Bailey, I just think, and look, is he a perfect prospect? I wouldn't say so. Is he a Myles Garrett coming out of college? No. But compared to the other two top edge rushers like Arvell Reese, like even Ruben Bain, I think there's fewer red flags. And with the second overall pick, you want to get that right, especially with all of the movement on the Jets defensive side of the football. Quinnen Williams gone, Sauce Gardner gone. You need a new face of that side of the ball. And I just think getting a premier edge rusher is a perfect way to start a rebuild if you're in a weak quarterback class, which is exactly what the 2026 NFL draft is. So if you can't get a quarterback, I think try to get a premier tackle or edge rusher. And I think the Jets are in pretty good shape up front on the offensive side of the football. So what's next? Get that pillar, that elite pass rusher. And honestly, when was the last time the Jets really had an elite, top tier edge rusher? Even when they had some incredible defenses, even going back to the Rex Ryan era, it wasn't really because of a defensive end. So I really like David Bailey there for the Jets at 2. It might seem like the obvious pick, but considering this draft class, I think it's the best value. It's the best position of need. And I think it could be the best player.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And when you look at all 3 of the top edge rushers, they all have their warts. They all have their red flags. None of them are really a clean prospect. Ruben Bain, you have the historical outlier with the arm length. Are you going to be able to bet on that if you're the Jets at number 2? Arvell Reese, there are the positional concerns, the tweener allegations, all of that different stuff. Is that a good move for the Jets to take a project when there's a lot going on behind the scenes there? And
maybe their second first round pick, Tyler, if they're picking it, in outside the top 10, that's okay. But at number 2, those red flags, I think are a bit too much for that pick.
And look, David Bailey doesn't have the excellent bend and dip that you always want from your edge rusher. He's got some character concerns. He's been in some scuffles. He's been in some situations that definitely have to be asked about and ironed out. But I think if you are the Jets and you're Aaron Glenn and you might get fired, or you're Darren Muji and you might get fired, going with the safest route, the lesser of evils I'm putting the Uncle Ty hat on in life. As you get older, you realize that most of life is not about what you actually want. It's about what the lesser of evils is. What's the least problematic? What's the least bad one? And I think you could make the argument that David Bailey is the least bad, but here's the thing. They could shake up the entire draft because everybody thinks it's going to be Reese or Bailey if they went with Sonny Styles. And if you go with Sonny Styles, you impact your defense and you eliminate all of those concerns with all three edge rushers. And it's something my guy John Butchko from Locked On Jets talked about this week.
It sounds like a trade down scenario would be the most likely scenario for the Jets to get Styles. But I have to say that 99 out of 100 times, I'd be against taking a linebacker in the top 10 in the NFL draft. I think that this year has two different dynamics to it that make me rethink my mindset. Number one is just that Styles is a really, really good prospect. I'm not going to use the term generational. I think it's overused, but there are not prospects like Sonny Styles every year in the NFL draft at the linebacker position. If there were, again, we'd rethink how important the linebacker spot is.
And I think John's spot on there. You do not get a Sonny Styles level prospect at linebacker very often. It doesn't happen. I know that would be, again, a shakeup of the draft. But what are your thoughts on the Jets just passing on the red flags of the edge rushers and maybe getting the best player in the draft at linebacker?
I don't love it at number 2. I think if Sonny Styles is your guy, could I switch picks with your Tennessee Titans with that 4th overall pick of Tennessee's trying to get up for their pick of the edge rushers in this class? Yeah. I think it'd be better value there if they could get down a few picks into that like 4 to 6 range. But if they don't want to risk losing that guy and he is your blue chip prospect, I would understand more now than I would have maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, right? I think the way the NFL is kind of changing and you look at the Swiss Army knives on defense that you want to counteract these mobile quarterbacks and the way these kind of guys can just make up so much ground when you're playing cover 2 and there's a lot of space on that, second level of the field, I would understand it. I think it's a little bit too rich for my blood at number 2, but the player in a vacuum, I think, would help a lot of needs for the Jets. Like Sonny Styles can wear so many hats, and I personally love that kind of Swiss Army knife on defense. Mm-hmm. I think, again, kind of like the edge rusher talk with Bain and with Bailey and Reese, it's just that number 2 pick. You want to maximize value there, and I'm not sure if that's the pick.
Louis, if the conversation, if you're honest, I mean, Sonny Styles has more efficient pass rushing numbers than even Arvell Reese does.
That's
so
a good
would
point.
It be an absolute shock for there are teams probably out there who say, I like Sonny Styles better than Arvell Reese, and I think that Sonny Styles does better than what Arvell Reese does at the things people say Arvell Reese is going to do. Like, why would I not take the better linebacker, the better edge rusher, the cleaner prospect, the freak athlete? I would not be shocked to see it go David Bailey at 2 to the Jets, and then Sonny Styles at 3 to the Cardinals, and then Arvell Reese falls. Like, I would not be 100% shocked by that. So if the Jets, if that's the case, if I feel like that, and the Jets just said, hey, we're taking Sonny Styles at 2, I guess I can't, because the non-premium position conversation, I think a lot of us are people in the top 5, like the Giants, like the Titans that I cover, are having that conversation of, do we really reach on an edge rusher with 30-inch arms or a tweener guy who we don't know if he can be an edge, or a guy who stomped on a guy's face and pushed a photographer and, doesn't play against the run? Or do we take like the elite linebacker or the elite running back, the elite safety prospect? That's the conversation. So I could see the Jets shaking it up, more likely to go edge. I'm more uncertain about what the Cardinals are going to do. They're one of the biggest mystery teams in the draft, and it's not just us. My guy, Alex Clancy from Locked On Cardinals, this was from a couple of weeks ago, but he was uncertain then, and it's still uncertain now.
Does it make you uneasy that there's no clarity on what the Cardinals are going to do at 3? Like, I know that this is technically still pretty early in the process. I know we're like 28 days away, but it's still pretty early in the progress. It's kind of like hurry up and wait. So after free agency's over, it's like, all right, draft. And it's like, okay, we got a bunch of time, man. There's a bunch of time before and the Cardinals choose. Like, you got a bunch of time. Visits, a lot of things need to happen. But isn't it a little off-putting that you have no idea what they're going to do?
We're a few weeks later, and we still have no idea. Could they go O-line? Would they take the other edge rusher? Could they go Jeremiyah Love? Will they trade back? Could they take Sonny Styles? Louis, right now with, about 10 days, 11 days until the draft, what do you think the Cardinals do at 3?
I think they probably take kind of like the Jets, the best edge rusher available, because when you look at these teams that cannot solve their quarterback problem this year, I think you just go with the meat and potatoes, right? When you're picking in the top 3, like just keep it simple, stupid. And I think one of those, the Reese Styles conversation that you just had was really interesting to me. And maybe they go with that kind of player. They missed on Isaiah Simmons back in the day. They wanted him to be that do-it-all Swiss Army knife.
Saving Collins too, man. They've missed a lot on those tweeners. I don't know if they could take Arvell Reese.
Yeah, right. But maybe they want to try again, and maybe third time's the charm. But I think, to me personally, I would take the best edge rusher available. Again, this is a really special edge class, and it's pretty weak in other areas. So when you're picking in the top 3, you can't get a quarterback. I think I prefer the same approach for both New York and Arizona.
You wonder, they took Darius Robinson 2 years ago, pass rusher in the first round. They take Walter Nolan in the first round last year.
Sign Josh Sweat.
They pay Josh Sweat big-time money. They bring back Baron Browning, who they've had for a couple of years. B.J. Ojulari is still there. They still have Zaven Collins, their first-round pick. It's kind of crazy that he's still on the team.
That is crazy,
so I don't know if they would go edge rusher in that scenario. They put so
many
many
resources. Do they go tackle there then? Offensive line instead? I mean, it's got to be trenches, though, for me, I think, for Arizona.
And I'm with you there, but, man, is Malinois, is Fano, is Monroe Freeling, are those guys worth the pick at number 3?
But I mean, man, like outside of edge rusher, I don't know if anybody is worth these selections. That's why I feel boring going back to that but I just can't talk myself into like anybody else at these picks. That's why Jeremiyah Love keeps popping up at a running back, because it's just not a really strong class at certain positions at the top of the draft.
But then again, they brought in Algier and brought back James Conner, and they still have Trey Benson, and they bring back Bam Knight. And it's like, they have 5 running backs on the roster right now. Can you take Jeremiyah Love? You're a bad team, top 3.
Not if I'm Arizona. You don't do that until, in my opinion, you think you have your franchise quarterback. Yeah, I would not do that.
No, I'm with you there. I think I have the right to change my mind, but right now, if I had to do a mock, I would put Sonny Styles there. I think they'd be scared off by Arvell Reese and feel more.
They're going to try it again, man. Arizona's third time's the charm for that Swiss Army knife on defense. Let's hope it works.
Hey, maybe so. Maybe they can get it right eventually. But again, you mentioned Jeremiyah Love. That could be an option. But if he doesn't go to Arizona at 3, which I agree with you, I don't see that. I think the Titans at 4 and the Giants at 5, both of those teams could be likely options to be Love Island. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. All right, folks, this time of year, you guys know taxes can be a lot, especially doing it the old way. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in, meeting a real person, and walking out knowing that your taxes are being handled right. Head to TurboTax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position that you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the right people who actually fit what you're looking for with the skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping that the right candidate stumbles across your post. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, that's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support my show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, Louie, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, taking a look at the top teams in the NFL draft and what they're going to do. Again, we talked about the Jets. We talked about the Cardinals. Now we got to get into two teams that could be ready to be stranded on Love Island with the Tennessee Titans, the New York Giants. Do want to remind you that throughout the week, we are going to go through every single pick in the first round, talk about what could happen, what could be their options on the draft board. Can't wait to dive into all that with you guys as we sit, just 11 days out from the NFL draft. But with that being said, again, we do come to the Tennessee Titans. And I would say that pairing Jeremiyah Love with the Tennessee Titans is one of the things that has happened the most. It's been one of the most common pairings that you see in mock drafts, conversations. The Titans like Love. You hear the reports, all of that. But as my guy David Harrison from Locked On Commanders pointed out, and I agree with, I think the Titans might actually prefer a trade down rather than taking Jeremiyah Love.
And while I expect the Tennessee Titans to want to take Jeremiyah Love, they could be looking for a trade back as well, but especially if they're just eyeing an offensive weapon. If the Tennessee Titans are like, listen, we just want to get either a receiver or either the top receiver, the top running back, or heaven help us, the top tight end in the NFL draft to help our quarterback Cam Ward, guess what? You can get one of those three, the top receiver, the top running back, or the top tight end at number 7. Hell, you probably get him at number 12, number 14 if you really wanted to. But number 7 is a much more secure spot. You move back and you get to get your guy, and you get to bump up your 2027 draft cap.
Louie, I'll give you a couple of confessions here. I like John Butchko of Locked On Jets. I have come around to the fact of I know that bad teams taking running backs early in the draft never works out. But in this particular draft class, I just think it's more viable than it would be in most draft class. I see it as a more likely strategy than I would see in a normal year. There is no Joe Alt. There is no Myles Garrett. There's no Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr. With the absence of those guys, I think it becomes more palatable. And if Arvell Reese and David Bailey are off the board at 2 and 3, that's where I think the Titans would have gone if they stick and pick at 4 and one of those guys was available. So I would not be upset if the Tennessee Titans took Jeremiyah Love at number 4, even though it goes against my conventional wisdom. But I will tell you this. If the Titans can get a trade back, like with the Commanders to 7, and still get Carnell Tate, Sonny Styles, one of the non-premium guys, or a premium guy, a Ruben Bain falls to 7, something like that, I think that is the most optimal outcome for the Tennessee Titans. What say you?
Yeah, I was just about to say, even before you played the video, I think the best thing for Tennessee is to surround Cam Ward with more talent on the offensive side of the football. I think teams can get comfortable when they think they found their franchise quarterback. They say, okay, now let's build the defense up. But you don't want to have to put all of that pressure on your quarterback's shoulders to elevate from the jump. And I think Cam Ward is very capable of being that player, but why should he have to be, right? Make it easier on him. And I think the Jeremiyah Love logic makes more sense this year, like you said, because of a weaker draft class at the premier positions.
And he's a weapon, Louis.
Yeah,
he's an offensive weapon.
I know they like to say that to justify it, but I do think the NFL's changing again. Running backs are becoming more inherently valuable. I mean, I cover the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley was the reason they won a championship.
And we're ahead of it.
Yeah, 13 months ago. I think Love is a weapon that could be a huge player in taking the load off Cam Ward's shoulders. But I love the idea of trading down a little bit to maximize value and then taking a pass catcher. I just think that's the best move, whether it's Tate or Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, Omar Cooper, like whoever your number one guy is. And I think it's very up in the air. You can make the case for like 4 to 5 pass catchers being the number one guy. Heck, I don't think Kenyon Sadiq's a top 5 pick, but once you get into that, 10 to 15 or 5 to 15 range, maybe we're talking. So I just think adding a weapon, and I'd prefer it to be a pass catcher over Jeremiyah Love. I think that's the best move for Cam Ward. The Titans are just in a tricky spot because, like the Cardinals and the Jets, is it worth that 4th overall pick? I would like to move down a little bit and take an area of need.
I have said throughout that I didn't think the Titans would be able to get a trade down, or it would be tougher to trade down, whether it's the Titans or any team in that general area, because it's not a good draft at the top. Right? It's not a good draft at the top. Why would you sacrifice multiple picks to go up to the top of a bad draft? But one way to look at it is if there aren't a lot of normal top 10, top 5, top 15 level talents, then that means that the players that go in the top 15 are going to be more bottom of the first round talents, which means that the back half of the first round is going to be second round talents. And maybe you might want to say, hey, I want to get a first round talent. Also, this point of, I think the teams at the top of the draft, like the Jets, the Cardinals, the Titans, the Giants, the Browns, I think that they will recognize this is not a normal top of the draft, and trades will be cheaper than they normally are. There will be a discount on trading up this year because every team understands this isn't a Joe Alt, Myles Garrett, Julio Jones. Like, there aren't guys like that. So I'm not going to pay you for that level of player like you would normally get. Like, I'm not going to give you Sammy Watkins, Bills trade up, top 4 type capital. But if you give me, a third round pick in the 70s to move up 5 spots, that would never work in the past, but I might take that now this year. You know what I mean? That might make it, if both those things ring true, there might be more trades than there normally are.
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a ton of teams moving like 10, 15 spots up the board, but I could see like the Titans making
3, 4,
a small
5.
swap with, like what if Washington identifies Jeremiyah Love as the perfect player to play next to Jaden Daniels to get back to the
David
playoffs
Blau.
this year? Right. Maybe they want to move up from 7 to 4. Like I can't imagine a team's going to move up from, 15 to 4, right, and trade multiple picks in the future to get any of these prospects. But I could see some teams circling certain guys as like, that's our preferred prospect. That's our guy. And maybe they move up in that kind of form. And I think that makes sense for Tennessee because if you're the Titans, you don't want to move too far down the board either because you want a chance at the, pass catching weapon of your choice. So I wouldn't want to move down like 5 spots. Ideally, it's, can I get like 6 or 7? Can Cleveland or Washington get interested in moving into 4? And then I can take a receiver at better value at 6 or 7 versus 4.
And I think 11 to 13, maybe 14 players at max, there's like a cutoff to me. You know what I mean? Between so that.
And not everybody can trade down. So like there will be some trade up partners, right? Because if you recognize you can't get out of the, back end of day one, you might want to get up, like you said, because there might only be 15, blue chip, quote unquote prospects that you identify as day one picks.
And with 5 teams having multiple first round picks, there are more teams who are able to make some kind of move up like that. So I think the Titans are a prime trade down team, but if a team trades up to the Cardinals, it may be difficult for the Titans to get a trade off. And in that case, I think Jeremiyah Love, where conventionally it would be a bad idea, I think it's more acceptable for the Titans. But if not the Titans, it might be the New York Giants. You know what I mean? The Giants could be a team, but again, I talk about why there might be more trades. On Locked On Giants, my guy Justin Mello and Patricia Traina talked about how there might be less trades because teams don't want to move up. The other side of that argument.
I think a big question that's been developing in terms of the big picture is this going to be a first round where we're going to see a lot of trades?
I'm truly torn on this topic, and I've gone back and forth on it because on one hand, you could make the argument that because it's not a very good draft, in all honesty, that teams will have fewer first round grades than they normally do. Sure, you can make the argument that that's going to make them, a bit more aggressive and wanting to, kind of hyper focus on their preferred targets. I can't wait to see how it's going to go, but for this to be such a weak draft in the eyes of evaluators, are we about to part with a bunch of 2027 draft capital? Because, historically speaking, when you're moving up, you've got to part with picks in a future draft. And next year's draft is being described as a potential all-timer. So are we really about to trade a bunch of 2027 draft picks so we could move up in a draft that is, being described by some as historically weak?
Now, I think that's a great point, but again, I think trades will be cheaper because of that. And if I'm the Giants, I would consider a move down because I think the Giants want offensive line. They, and if they want an offensive lineman, again, I think a trade back makes sense. But if not, I'm looking at them as Sonny Styles. I think they're a Sonny Styles team personally.
Imagine putting Sonny Styles behind that front four already with Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau and Abdul Carter in year 2, and we'll see what happens if they figure things out with, Dexter Lawrence. But you add that kind of do-it-all player behind them on the second level, that Giants front seven would be unbelievable. That would be really enticing, but I kind of get also why they would want to take an offensive-minded approach. It's the same with the Tennessee Titans logic of supporting your year 2 quarterback that's looking to take a jump, and they lost a weapon in Wan'Dale Robinson to the Giants. Malik Neighbors coming off a serious injury. Maybe you want to protect Dart better. Maybe you want to get him a weapon. But yeah, man, like that, if he falls to 5, the temptation to take Sonny Styles. I think he's just the best player on the board, and you got to do it. But if he's not there, ideally, kind of like Tennessee, you can trade down a few spots, take an offensive player to support Dart with better value.
I don't understand the Jeremiyah Love stuff with the Giants. You have Cam Scattaboo.
I don't either.
Tyrone Tracy has been pretty good. If you want to add at running back, I just don't know why they need to go Jeremiyah Love there. I just don't understand it. But a team that could potentially take Jeremiyah Love is the Washington Commanders. But it depends on what happens with the Browns at number 6. What will those teams do? Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I love the most. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with the player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at the stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. Me personally, I'm looking at the Celtics. They're going to be hard to beat in the Eastern Conference. Could lay some action on them. I would not lay some action on my Los Angeles Lakers. I'm telling you that right now. But either way, make sure you head to FanDuel.com to get started. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. It's FanDuel. Play your game. All right, Lou, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL, talking about the top teams in the NFL draft, what they might do. We hit the Jets, we hit the Cardinals, the Titans, the Giants. Now I want to talk about the Browns and the Commanders, of course. We all know what the Raiders are going to do. I just completely skipped over it. There's just no need. They're taking Kirk Cousins 2.0, Fernando Mendoza. But with that being said, we do look at the Cleveland Browns. And I would say if Jeremiyah Love is the most common pick for the Titans, one of the other most common picks that you see in mock drafts is Carnell Tate to the Cleveland Browns. But my guy Spencer German from Locked On Browns says, not so fast, my friends.
And one thing that surprised me throughout this entire process has been how adamant people have been that the only option at 6 is Carnell Tate. And again, I don't want to use this as a segment to knock or disparage or talk bad about Carnell Tate, because I think Carnell Tate is a really good player. You see the Ohio State helmet behind me. I'm an Ohio State fan. I follow Ohio State. I love Carnell Tate's game. I like what he brings to the table. But as I think about where the Browns are at, and I understand receiver's a massive, massive need, and he's the number 1 on the board. But I just don't know that Carnell Tate is such a slam dunk home run of a prospect that you have to pull the trigger at 6.
I agree. I'm not as high on Carnell Tate as others. I like Jordan Tyson better. I might take a KC Conception. If I really want to get spicy, a KC Concepcion might even be a pick for me over Carnell Tate. I'll give Tate his just due as number 2, but I just don't see Carnell Tate as an elite number 1 option. I know the Browns need wide receiver, but I'm looking at them, and I think if one of the pass rushers drops there, I could see them. You put Sonny Styles next to Carson Schlesinger, you might have the best linebacker duo in the entire NFL. Could they go cornerback? Offensive line. The Browns they did it patchwork this year, but can you really trust what they have on the O-line? They could be a team that takes offensive tackle pretty early on. I think that's what they would want to do. I'm not certain that Carnell Tate is a shoe-in. I think Tate could be one of those guys that maybe drops a little bit into the 9, 10, 11 range.
I'm glad that you see it the same way I do. Carnell Tate's not my number 1 receiver in this draft. I personally think it is Jordan Tyson, and I don't think Carnell Tate is worth a top 7 pick. For me, with the Cleveland Browns, I would try to go with the offensive line. Or if I want a pass catcher, I'd rather trade down if I'm going to take Tate. I just think as the draft process goes along, people start to, I think, suffer from groupthink. And it didn't feel like for the first couple months of the pre-draft process, Tate was like the unanimous consensus wide receiver one. I feel like there was really good discourse and debate about 3 or 4 different players. And then suddenly he just, through everybody's lenses, became the guy. And I'm like, when did this happen? I don't know. Like, I think Tate's a good player, but is he a top 6 pick in a really good receiver class?
Would Alec Pierce go top 6 in an NFL draft? That's the question in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And for me, if I'm Cleveland and I'm going with the offense, I think they need to continue to add long-term pillars up front to the offensive line. Get that ready for when you finally strike with a quarterback prospect, preferably in 2027. I think that should be the focus.
And whereas I don't think there's good value taking one of the offensive tackles at number 3 for Arizona, doing it at number 6 for the Browns is about
from how we know, I think that's a solid spot for him. Yeah,
6 to 12. I think that is good value there, so that makes sense. The Washington Commanders are the last team. We heard David Harrison from Locked On Commanders talked about a potential trade up to get Jeremiyah Love with the Titans earlier. But if you're the Commanders, they're another team that's a wild card to me. I could see them adding on defense. I think they really want a pass rusher. They're a Ruben Bain team to me that I think could see taking Ruben Bain at 7. I could see them take Tate. I think Tate would fit very well with Terry McLaurin at wide receiver, the 2 Ohio State guys together. I could see them taking Jeremiyah Love as well if he were to fall to 7. I could see Washington doing a ton of different things. What route would you go if you were them and you had your options?
See, they do feel like a team. I think you don't take a running back, especially this early, until you're ready to make their touches mean something. You know what I mean? Like, I think when you take Saquon Barkley without a franchise quarterback, when you take Ashton Genty, when you're not in a contending window, you're kind of just wasting away his career. You're kind of wasting away touches. So for me, I actually think of all the teams you're trying to find a fit for Jeremiyah Love, even though I get why the Titans could talk themselves into it or the Giants to support a young developing quarterback, I still don't know if those teams are ready to contend at the level Washington did 2 years ago. I think the Commanders are thinking in that way of let's
not forget about that.
Yeah,
they were just right there.
They were in the NFC title, and I think their expectations are not the same as outside of the organization. I think they could see Jeremiyah Love as this is the right time to do this next to a mobile quarterback. I think this is probably going to be the team that makes Love their guy.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. We need a little love in Washington, D.C. right now anyways. But they added a ton of pass rushers, Charles Omenihu, Kayvon Chason. They paid a bunch to Odafe Owe. They could use a linebacker, in my opinion, which is why I see them as a Sonny Styles option if Love is off the board. Leo Chenal, good player. Frankie Louvu is more of a Swiss Army knife type linebacker than just a pure stack off-ball linebacker, so that could make a ton of sense for me. They could be in a cornerback market for an outside corner after the Marshawn Lattimore thing didn't necessarily work out, but they have enough on their roster. They have a good offensive line in place with a former first-round tackle and Josh Connerly stepping in. Sam Cosmi is a great player. Chris Paul is a good player. They have tons. So you have a number 1 wide receiver in Terry McLaurin. You bring in Chigakonkwo to be that move tight end for you. You have some blocking tight ends. Like, they have enough answers on their roster where I think they could justify a Jeremiyah Love selection and potentially even a move up. Again, if trades are cheap, if they wanted to pay a 3rd rounder to move up 3 spots with the Titans and the Titans say, give us an extra top 100 pick, I think the Titans would even give me a 2nd in 2027.
In a better
move up 3 picks.
I think that's the move. The Titans Commanders trade, I think, is the most likely. If there's a trade inside the top 10, I think that's probably the move. Washington goes from 7 to 4 to take Love.
I think that does make a lot of sense, but I got to tell you, if I had to rank them, I think the Chiefs or the Cowboys coming up to number 3 with the Cardinals to get the other pass rusher. I think that's more likely than the Titans Commander swap, but I would definitely have that at number 2. But it's going to be interesting to see again. About 11 days out from the draft, we're going to do the next set of teams on tomorrow's Locked On NFL. Make sure that you're here. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Legacy, Louis DiBiase. As we tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in and stay safe out there.